So if you guys are watching this, just make sure that you don't see anything weird going on in the background, any kind of like fuzzy static or anything, because that means I think that the ghosts might be coming to get you. I don't really know though. Movie wasn't too clear. Welcome back to 31 Days of Halloween. Today we are going to be talking about the Japanese version of the movie Pulse. I don't know how to say it in Japanese. It's spelled Kairo. If I had to guess and try, I'd probably pronounce it Kairo. Maybe. I guess if you happen to speak Japanese and can tell me whether or not I'm pronouncing it correctly, let me know down below. But this version of the movie, the Japanese version of Pulse, came out in 2001 before the American version in I think 2005. I saw the American version in 2005 when it first came out in theaters. I vividly remember sitting in the grungy theater that was underneath the Toys R Us, watching this movie with my friends and being absolutely terrified of it. The idea that technology would, can, and now does turn against us at that point in time in 2005 was really rather scary. That it could be some kind of conduit for the other side to get to us. And I guess you had kind of seen that in earlier movies like Poltergeist, where the spirits come through the television to snatch this little girl and torment her family. So even back then, you get this idea that technology is not necessarily our friend, and it's not necessarily this great thing that we always seem to believe it is. So in the original American version, that one really scared me, and I hadn't realized until much later that a lot of these American horror movies from that time period were based on Japanese movies. So like The Grudge, The Ring, Shudder, White Noise, Pulse. So they all basically took these Japanese movies and were like, we think we can do it better, and then redid them. So I've only ever seen the Japanese version of The Grudge. I've watched, I believe, 1 and 2 because there's a couple of them. I did like the Japanese version a little better. I thought it was creepier than the American Grudge, even if it had like extra weird storylines that I didn't quite get. But in this case, from what I can remember, because the last time I saw the American version of Pulse was in theaters in 2005. So we're talking almost 20 years ago. So I did like that one better. I think I should rewatch it just to compare. But this version of Pulse, the Japanese version, was really weird. The film was very it looked almost old, like it was filmed in the 80s with a bad camera, and the music oftentimes sounded like it was something from the 1950s. And I know that movie markets overseas didn't move up as quickly or didn't advance as quickly as they did in America, so their techniques tended to not be as good, and like they looked older and stuff. So I'm wondering if that is what was going on here, or if it was just choices that the director made to make this movie look and sound like this. One of the other issues I had with this movie is that they introduced so many different characters, didn't tell you what their names were right away, and then like they were on the screen for all of 5 seconds, and then we moved on to another person to talk about. People would die, and it would just be like, oh, okay, so-and-so died, like, let's move on. It's like, but who was that? Like, why are they dead? What happened to them? We didn't even get to see, they're just dead. We didn't even get to see it. We just hear over the phone that so-and-so is dead. It was not an enjoyable movie to watch. It was a 2-hour movie, and it felt like 2 hours. It just dragged. There were a lot of parts where you could have fast forwarded because nothing happened. And there was nothing that happening that was relevant to the movie. It was just kind of people driving or people walking around, or they were tending to plants for part of the movie. Even when there was dialogue during those parts, it wasn't even relevant to the movie. It didn't help to move the movie along at all. So it was a very frustrating experience, especially coming into it, having the American version in my head. And I don't think this would have been an instance where if I hadn't seen the American version, I would have liked this one better. It has some creepy moments where they make good use of the lighting and shadows and people just being generally creepy. But those moments are way too far and few between for a 2-hour movie of this length. There was also a lot of stuff that wasn't really explained. So it seems like there's some kind of computer program that people are installing on their computers, and this allows the ghosts to come in somehow. There's red tape being used, and I remember it being explained in the American version why the red tape works. I'm not going to say here because it's a spoiler, but that never gets explained in this version. There is a point where stuff gets printed out of a printer, and all the subtitles gave me was something about red construction tape. Like, that was the only subtitle. So I'm thinking maybe on that paper it might have explained it a little better. So that was another frustrating thing with this, is that a lot of times the characters were reading stuff, and it was obviously important and relevant to the movie, but none of the subtitles that I could get up on the screen would translate what the characters were reading. So it was frustrating to kind of be missing out on part of the story, and maybe that would have helped to explain things better. But unfortunately, I do not read Japanese, so I really couldn't be clued into what was going on in that movie when they were reading things. There was also a lot of weird stuff where stuff would be happening and characters would completely ignore it. So at one point, one of the characters is walking through a computer lab, and all of the computer chairs are just kind of rolling around and moving about by themselves. And he doesn't seem to be bothered by this. He doesn't comment on it. He doesn't even look at the chairs. Like, it rolls right past him. He doesn't even seem to care. What? Why? I understand, like, you're focused on something else, but there's literally, like, 6 computer chairs rolling around in this room like they're a pack or something, and you don't think this is something you should be concerned about or comment on or something like that? Just weird stuff like that. One of the things that I did find interesting was, again, this movie's set in 2001, and one of the characters had to explain to another how to use basic functions of a computer, like how to bookmark something, what the print screen key is. And I grew up during that time period where, we had to learn how to use computers, and they were a foreign concept, and the internet, oh my gosh, wow, like, the internet is so cool, like, we can do anything with this. And it was just interesting to see that sort of flashback to when nobody knew this stuff. It's not like the innate sort of thing we do now. Like, we just know how to do these things, and we know how to do more complicated things, like right-click and whatever. But, like, these characters didn't know this stuff because the internet was still so new, and computers were so new. It was really neat to see that. And that's kind of where the neatness ends. I have zero interest in ever seeing this movie yet. It actually gets decent, like, middle of the pack scores from IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes. IMDb gives it a 6.6. Rotten Tomatoes gives it a 75 from the critics. And general viewership gives it like a 60. So the scores are sort of consistent with the critics liking the movie a little bit more. I would give it, I guess, a 2. I can't justify giving it anything higher than a 1 or a 2 because I have zero interest in rewatching it. I wish I had fast forwarded through a lot of it. And it's consistent with scores that I've given to other movies that I didn't care for, like Martyrs or Deliverance. So I can't justify giving it anything higher than a 2. My friend who watched it with me gave it a 4, which I told him was very generous. He, considering the fact that he said at the end of it that this was a terrible movie and it was boring and he didn't like it. I was like, well, then why are you giving it a 4? And he goes, because I'm just giving it a 4. So I am going to give an actual score of like 1 or 2. So I guess maybe like I'll give it a 1.5 since I'm between a 1 and a 2. Yeah, I did not enjoy this movie. It was too slow. It was not scary enough. There were too many different characters introduced and then disappearing, and they jump around a lot and things aren't really explained. And again, that could be because maybe it's being explained with the written text that's on the screen that I can't read and that I wasn't given subtitles for. But unfortunately, I don't think even if I had been given the subtitles for it, I would have liked this movie any better because of it being slow and not scary enough. This did not need to be a 2-hour movie. An hour and a half at most, which I think is what the American version is. And the score also plays into the fact that I don't believe that if I hadn't seen the American version, I would have liked this one any better. Because I think that's an important consideration too. Because I think that sometimes when we see remakes or sequels or like kind of reimaginings of stuff, and then we go back to the source material, we're already kind of affected by what we've seen, and that can sometimes sway us in one way or another as to our opinions on the source material. Honestly, if I hadn't been watching this movie for 31 Days of Halloween, I probably wouldn't even have finished this. Or I probably would have just fast forwarded through a lot of the parts because it was too long and not enough was happening. So I'm going to talk about some spoilers. I'm gonna mix spoilers a little bit from the American version and from this one, just because I'm comparing and contrasting a little bit. So if you haven't seen either of them, I don't recommend. If you've seen the American one, don't worry about the spoilers, because I don't recommend seeing this movie. I would not recommend someone spending 2 hours of their time watching this. But if you are interested in it, then now is your time to, like, comment, subscribe, save me, have me thank you for that, and come back later or for the next video after you've seen this one. Thanks for coming by, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Because now we are going to spoilers. So in the American version, they explain that the red tape prevents the ghosts from coming through. So the whole idea is that these ghosts are coming through the computers and they're trying to make people be with them because they're lonely, and they basically discover that because of the frequencies that the ghosts are coming out of the computers on, they can't get through the color red because of the frequency that the color red exists at. And I always find this bizarre that colors exist at frequencies, and that's why we can see them, because our eyes see these certain frequencies. Science is weird, the human body is weird, but it's so cool. And I like that we actually got that explanation here, whereas we didn't in the Japanese version. And again, maybe it's because it was written on the paper that I couldn't read. But we didn't get it, as far as I know, in the Japanese version. Whereas in the American version, we do get that that explanation, which I liked. I liked having more of an explanation because it helped to make the movie make more sense. A lot of the movie focuses on loneliness and being alone and people basically killing themselves because they feel such a despair that they don't think that anything will ever be good again, or they'll never find someone to spend time with again. And that's kind of the basis of the movie, and it's a really scary concept, especially when you consider that we are so connected now through the internet, and yet we have the highest rates of depression. We have higher rates of suicide. We have higher rates of mental illness. And yet we have so much access to other people and information at our fingertips. So why? is it really that the internet is turning us against each other, the sort of ghost in the machine, except it's not really ghosts that are making us feel this loneliness like they do in the movie. It's just the internet as a whole making us somehow feel this loneliness. Um, then that's why I said at the beginning of the movie that the themes in this are even more pertinent now than they were then, because the internet is so widespread now. Like, we literally have the internet on our phones, that we carry around with us everywhere. It used to be like if you were out somewhere and you were like, oh, like, I have a question, like, how long do sheep live? You couldn't just sit there and look it up on your phone. You had to go home and do it. And now it's like we have access to everything at our fingertips, no matter where we are, as long as we have a signal. Um, One of the and I think I again, it lends itself really well to the theme in this story of loneliness and the internet kind of more separating us or bringing danger and things into our lives that we hadn't had access to before, and that's even more pertinent now. The American version also had, from what I remember, a bleaker ending than the Japanese version does. So in the Japanese version, it ends with the two characters that are still alive, um, out of the many that we met, and they're on a boat and they're trying to make their way to Latin America because they said they still hear people talking there. So there's some hope there that the world will still go on, that people are being able to avoid the ghosts and stuff. Whereas in the American version, I believe they kind of just like trap themselves in a bunker covered with red tape, and it's pretty bleak. Like they're just like, well, I guess we're gonna be here for the rest of our lives, and we may or may not get out. Um, so again, that's why I want to rewatch the American one, because I don't remember if that's like the actual ending or not. That's kind of vaguely what I remember. But again, 20 years ago, kind of a long time to remember what happened in this movie. But I do kind of remember that the American version is bleaker compared to the Japanese version, which is very different because usually your Japanese horrors have far bleaker endings, whereas American endings are, we want to be more hopeful. And that also happened with The Descent. If you've seen my movie from that, and no spoilers about The Descent, but there were two endings. One where they asked the director to make the American ending more hopeful, whereas the UK ending is supposedly more bleak. So I kind of find it interesting that the American ending for this movie particularly was more bleak, and the Japanese ending was actually kind of more hopeful. So that's pretty much all I have to say about this movie, because like I said, not much happened. I don't recommend watching the original Pulse, but if you haven't seen the American one, go watch that one. I remember that one being significantly better, even though I've just spoiled pretty much the whole ending for you. But I did warn you before you came here, so you can't be mad. Thanks for watching. I am just going to remind you guys that I do have a coffee, kofi.com. The link is down below in the explanation part of this video. Feel free to send me some funds, or don't. I'm working on getting rewards or goodies that I can send out to you guys, whether they're stickers or allowing you to choose a movie for me in the future to watch and review, because I would like to continue doing this and sharing information with you about these movies, reviewing them for you, because I genuinely enjoy it, and I'm hoping you guys genuinely enjoy it too. Thank you, everybody, for liking, sharing, commenting, subscribing to my videos, and I will see you guys in the next video. Just make sure you don't get any creepy ghosts coming through your computer, and if you do, just remember that you are not alone. Don't listen to what the ghosts say. Bye, guys.